it would be probably best for me when we do this for real, is to go back and look at the questions and tie in some key notes, possibly.
That'd be a good idea.
That would be better.
If you can't find them, I'll reprint those.
Okay, then we'll have more accurate dates or things I need to get.
Good idea. All right, so, Pops, where were you born?
Madison, Wisconsin, 1937.
What day?
I don't have a clue. I don't know, probably on a Thursday.
No, as in December what?
17th.
There you go. And why were your folks in Madison?
My dad, your grandfather, was in the dynamite business with the DuPont company. And he was in a sales capacity, and he was working on projects for several years in the north, and they were residing in Madison, Wisconsin, with which we lived there for, I was born in 37. I don't know the date he started that tenure with DuPont in Madison, but I presume we were there only 2 years, and then we moved from there to Hammond, Louisiana. And
First Hammond trip.
that was my first, well, I was a baby. I was 2 years old when they moved, yeah. So Mother and Daddy had an opportunity to move to the south. Daddy was raised in LaGrange, Georgia, and grandmother Florrie was raised in, I think she was maybe Valdosta, Savannah, mostly Savannah, Georgia, where they're buried. Mm-hmm. She and your grandfather, your great-grandfather, were both buried in Savannah, Georgia.
We have a picture of a big White House. Burned or something, and a big front porch.
That was the Pinkard side. That was the Pinkard side.
Maternal. No, that's your maternal side.
Yes.
Okay.
My paternal side was Mary Pinkard, and her father was named Swanson. And Swanson had the big White House in LaGrange.
He was the Harley dealer, one of the first Harley Davidson.
I think he was, but he was big in the shoe business.
Ah, okay.
Grandfather Pinkard was in the shoe business. I remember him as a little boy. When we'd go to visit, we'd leave Hammond. In those days, we didn't have airplanes to fly on, railroads and cars, and we would generally leave Hammond to go and visit Mary and Edward.
In Savannah?
No, we'd do that in LaGrange. We stopped.
Okay.
They had moved from Savannah, where it started, to LaGrange. I think we probably got to work through this because grandfather Pinkard, grandfather Thompson was an educator. He was tied in. He was the president of LaGrange College for probably about 10 years. But we would go and see them, and we'd go and see grandmother Mary, my great-grandmother, and they were also living at that time in LaGrange. So that's where they all met. I don't know when Daddy met Mother, but she was probably 17, 18, because she was married when she was 19.
Your mother, Marianne? Mm-hmm. But she went to college, right?
No, she did not.
She never did go.
She never did go to college. No.
Oh.
Mother was self-educated. Educated by her mother. No, she didn't. She was not fortunate enough to go to college.
Did Edward?
Edward was the scholar. Yeah, Edward was the artist in the Pinkard family. He was raised in LaGrange. They lived on the main street there, the big White House. They lived with grandfather Pinkard. Is that confusing?
No.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you moved to Hammond when you were 2.
It's about 1940, right? The wartime. Yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And Daddy was in dynamite then, but then the dynamite was used. He was probably working in Madison on structures where dynamite was used.
Was that town I went to last May, Madisonville or Madison?
That was in Hammond. That was in Hammond.
When he built that barge.
Yeah, he had.
Was it during the war or right after the war?
No, that was after the war, because he got those were boats owned by the Army. Mm-hmm. And after the war was over, they started selling off a lot of property and vehicles and barges and boats and things that they didn't need. And he bought a water barge in Madisonville. He and his best friend Kenneth Baird decided they were going to create a boat for oil companies to rent to do exploration of the Gulf of
It was
Mexico.
more of a residential boat. To live on, it wasn't that boat that actually did.
No, the boat was not powered. The boat was moved from place to place by tugs.
Yeah, they would tow it.
They might tow it out 70 miles out in the Gulf of Mexico. And
Cold?
No, not yet.
no, we're practicing.
All right, so when did Ann come along, your sister?
Ann is 5 years, I think it's 5 years younger. She was born in Hammond.
She's 3.5 years.
Oh, excuse me, my editor is with me.
So she was born in Hammond.
Yeah, she was born in Hammond, yeah. Shortly after we arrived in Hammond.
So what did y'all do after, was it tough during the war? What was, you don't remember?
I do remember, the one thing I remember, we lived in Hammond about 5 miles from town. And I remember we would all, wartime was ending then, but they were still bringing war prisoners. Where you going, babes?
War,
Get some tea.
war prisoners?
Prisoners were coming in, brought in by trucks to Hammond. And they were put into retention, I guess. They were put in at the airport. They had facilities in bringing troops in from Germany that had been captured. And they had to place them somewhere in the United States, and Hammond was one of the many places they went.
That's interesting.
It had nothing to do with his business, but he was there because a lot of building, a lot of things that needed to be done. They were in those days using a lot of dynamite, and there was a lot of exploration going on for oil in the Gulf of Mexico, and that's where he came up with the idea of, he was a true entrepreneur, of found the boat. They hauled the boat into Madisonville by tug, and it was probably he had a small crew. He and Kenneth Baird and a crew of laborers built a hotel for these people in.
How many years did that business?
I would say that probably lasted about 10. I would imagine 10 years. And the name of the boat, they named it the Kilroy. And the
That little guy with the long nose that
yes,
hangs over the wall?
yes. And Kilroy they had a contract with, I think it was Shell Oil Company, to lease that boat for X number of years. And the business went on and on and on for years, and they were getting in those days $1,500 a month. And,
Wow.
and that boat would house around, I think they could house around 150 men on the boat.
so
Let's say the barge, not the boat. Is
What
probably
happened to the barge?
the barge. The Kilroy sunk. Daddy was one of the first people in the business of building a resident
With men on it?
with men on it. They'd go out.
No, the men died?
No, the boat sunk. The men got off. It was in a.
Oh.
The boat was in a hurricane, and it went through many hurricanes. And Kenneth Baird, Kenneth was a real close friend, and he had sort of a bad marriage, and this was a great escape for him to go live on the boat. He lived on the Kilroy. He was the maintenance man. He did everything. And in those days, there was no way, obviously no computers. The only way they could communicate was by phone. But that was a marine type of, and very poor connections.
Right.
And this particular time, Kenneth, I remember he said, Al, we're in trouble with the boat. He said, I don't know if we're going to make it.
Was he on it during?
He was on the boat, and the boat broke loose they had it tethered,
Yeah.
and the boat broke loose and was floating, and he was trying to keep up where the boat was being taken in the high winds. So, anyway, Kenneth got off the boat. I don't know for how many days, but the storm probably lasted for a couple of weeks. And somewhere in the height of the storm, the Kilroy sunk. It just went, that was the end of the Kilroy, and Daddy came. And prior to that, it was obvious that the Gulf oil companies, Shell Oils, Marathon, Conoco, and all the companies were beginning to build their own boats because they thought they could save money and be more in control of where it was, when it was. So it was quite a venture. That was a major. He in due course of that 10 years, he left the DuPont company, and because he had more to do than he could say grace over as far as keeping that afloat. And he had a number of other things. He and Kenneth, after that ended, they went into building a couple of houses in Hammond for sale, small houses, probably in those days 1,500 square feet. And he had those, he did that for quite a while. Then he decided he got back in, he joined, he started his own company when he left, the barge sunk, and he got in the dynamite business for himself. He was buying dynamite from the various manufacturers, being DuPont, Hercules, and Atlas. And they produced all the dynamite that was used in the U.S. and I guess abroad.
So you went to Hammond Elementary or something?
I started at Southeastern Training School, the first grade there. That was a teaching school, sort of like Vanderbilt trained doctors and educate doctors.
That was your elementary school?
That was a training school for educators, people going to college that wanted to be teachers. And Southeastern Junior High School was in Hammond. It was part of the university there, which is.
Oh. Then you went to, after